Upfront and Outspoken with Bob Williams. If you love the Constitution,
man is not free unless government is limited.
If you love freedom,
as government expands, liberty contracts.
If you believe in personal responsibility, if you believe America is still the greatest nation on earth, then get ready for an experience you'll never forget. This is Upfront and Outspoken. Here's your host, Bob Williams.
Some folks are born made to wave the flag. Ooh, they're red, white, and blue.
And good Thursday morning. This is Bob Williams, and this is Upfront Outspoken. Joining me now live are two very special guests. Number one, the main guest, Walter Davis, host of Progress in the World, and along with him, I decided I was going to bring in host of Passionate Justice, Jonathan Wolfman. Good morning, gentlemen. Sorry to get you guys up so early this Thursday morning.
Good morning.
Oh, good morning. I think Walter's got the real early get up, not me.
Yeah, I think it's like, what, 4:30 by you, isn't it, Walter? About 4:30, 4:35, something like that?
There you go, 4:35, 4:34.
So indeed, it is early. Well, I've been wanting to get Walter, I want to let all my listeners know, I wanted to get Walter on several weeks ago, but unfortunately, that did not happen. Uh-oh, we got some static. That did not happen as Walter's wife had a severe health issue. But I am so glad to get you on today, Walter. Now, Walter, you know, your program, I've had a chance to listen to segments of it through, you know, since you've been on with the Starcom Radio Network, and you have, how can I say, you want people to think outside the box. You want to explain to my listeners what you mean by that.
Well, basically, we've been miseducated. We've been taught what to think and not how to think in our society. So I want people to start really investigating what we've been taught, what we've been led to believe by the lamestream media, and to really start to think and also to unite on a level in which we can make our communities a better place to live.
Now, some of the outside-the-box thinking you have presented were in reference to, you've had guests on that have talked about certain medications that people take who are, you know, they suffer from depression or they suffer from other infirmities, and sometimes they are what they call psychotropic medications. And you are a advocate against people taking such medications. Why is that?
Well, in the 1970s, the pharmaceutical industry conspired or coordinated with the psychiatric industry to invent mental disorders and to match them with medications. And so right now we have 22 veterans committing suicide every single day, as well as dying in their sleep. And I'm a veteran. I was in the Navy for 25 years. I was given those medications by the Veterans Administration after I retired, and essentially across the board, I see people suffering from brain damage and also killing themselves. So what good does it make to take a drug for depression when it makes you kill yourself? So all of the recent shootings that we've had, the string of school shootings, they've all been committed by people under the influence of psychotropic drugs. And so these drugs don't work. They have these black label warnings which say you could commit suicide, you can become homicidal, etc. And everybody thinks that, well, that won't happen to me. Well, in fact, we have people dying in large numbers. We even have infants being given these medications. Right now we have 8 million children around the world on these drugs, and 1 million of those are below the age of 1. So how do you determine a 5-month-old baby has ADHD or anxiety?
That's a very good question, Jonathan. I just about heard you pop in there. Go ahead.
Oh, you know, I think that it's fascinating. And what Walter says makes me think of every time I see a medication advert on television. Obviously, their lawyers force the companies and the ad companies to give you a list with lovely music and lovely people romping through the valleys and hills, but they give you a list of everything this medication can do that just might make you die.
The thing is,
and that's what Walter reminds me of, and that there may be something to what he's saying. I'm very new to this.
What amazes me, and I'm glad you brought that up, Jonathan, and I'm sure Walter will have a comment regarding this as well, is, you see the medication, okay, like you said, Jonathan, you see these, high-profile models, they're bouncing around, this is me before, this is me after, and then you see in very, very, very tiny letters the, side effects to these medications, and it seems that the side effects are worse than the problem itself. So here's my question to Walter. Given that these medications have so many side effects, and some of them, like you said, can cause suicidal thoughts, can cause people to go out and commit these heinous crimes, how do we, as a public, address the issues these medications are supposed to cure or aid in?
Well, there are natural supplements that can help people with things like depression. The body does not have a shortage of drugs. It has a shortage of nutrients. And so we get better by taking nutrients. For example, I have prostate cancer. And so the only thing that they know how to treat prostate cancer with at the VA hospital and most major hospitals is to slash and burn and poison. So they want to cut on me, which could cause me to have impotence and incontinence at my age, or I can take supplements. So I have been taking supplements, and I decided to cut back, for example, and not take as much, because this cost me about $2,000 a month, to go this route.
Now I don't mean to interrupt you, but when you said, when you were talking about the slash and burn that the VA has, my brother had prostate cancer, and when you had mentioned the potential of impotency, that actually did occur with my brother during this surgical procedure. And the supplements you are referring to, what, for example, are some of those supplements?
Well, I am taking supplements like poly-MBA, and I am taking things like iron and other supplements. I can give you a list in a second. You kind of caught me off guard with that question.
Well, I'm sorry. The thing is people are always concerned about their health, and when you mention the fact that the supplements, granted, the FDA many times has not approved certain dietary supplements, and I know our listeners are definitely going to want to know, what can I take? What can I, do naturally to rid myself of maybe a mental issue, maybe a physical issue, without having to go through chemotherapy, without having to go through taking quetiapine or Prozac or this, and that this is why I asked, and I'm sorry I caught you off guard.
No problem. I have it. I'll command it. I have this 57-year-old brain that has to catch up with me.
You kind of got like what I got. It's called CRS at times. It's commonly referred to as can't remember shit.
Yeah, I have Dame Bramage.
And I'm older than all of you boys, so I've got it a lot worse, trust me.
Well, for example, niacin can help you with depression. And I'll let you know that my PSA level, which is how they measure cancer, was a 29 in October. And I began taking my poly-MVA supplements. I take vitamin D. Vitamin D kills cancer in a petri dish. If you put cancer cells in with vitamin D, it kills it. So I take vitamin D. I am using things like VSL3, which is a probiotic, and it helps me digest my food correctly. And I'm doing colon hydrotherapy. I am doing ion therapy. So what each person needs to do is to get a measurement of the level of nutrients in their body, and I got that done with a naturopath. And so there are naturopath doctors that have the testing available, and the VA they don't do these tests. They don't handle things like heavy metal. They don't help you clean your system. There are $22 bottles of something called bentonite. Bentonite is a liquid pharmaceutical grade clay that I drink 3 times a week inside of tea. I just take a teaspoon of that. That absorbs 33 times its weight in toxins from the body. I do IR, infrared treatment. I even cook my food using infrared rays, and that disinfects the foods, kills bacteria, cooks them more thoroughly. I avoid microwave. So food for me is medicine. So I cut my PSA in half in just 2 months by increasing my dosages of poly-NVA and the natural supplements that I'm taking based upon the level of nutrients in my body. So everybody needs to be aware that the Flexner report came out in 1910. It was issued by supporters of Rockefeller. And basically what they said in this is that petrochemicals were going to be the only way that we were going to be able to get treatment. So the naturopath field, acupuncture, those things were nixed. They were dismissed as quackery. However, for millions of years before we had all of these petrochemical medications, well, the people that were called witch doctors and others, they actually were practicing medicine. So the medicine that we have now is actually the alternative medicine, and it's based upon petrochemicals. And this is why we get all these terrible side effects. The body doesn't crave drugs. The body craves nutrients. And so when you keep those nutrients in balance, then the way of managing diseases is a lot healthier for me. So my mom was a nurse, and she told me, son, you got to take your cancer very serious. Well, she's dead now. She went the conventional way. My wife didn't listen to me. She's dead now. There were people in my support group in La Jolla. They're dead now. They didn't observe the natural pathway that I chose to treat myself, and that's using food and using nutrients and the way that we eat things. If you're eating fried foods, for example, especially French fries that come from McDonald's or some of the other fast food restaurants, well, they don't change their grease when they make the French fries, and so the French fry grease actually has the equivalent of arsenic inside of it. So every time you eat those French fries, you're getting that, because when you take vegetable oil and you heat it up and then cool it off, well, it becomes poisonous. The stuff that we're eating in our bread that makes our bread white, that's bromide, and that's a poison. It collects in our liver, it collects in our intestines. So we're slowly getting poisoned through our food supply, and it's necessary to cleanse the body as well as apply these supplements, and that's how I've been able to survive for more than 7 years with cancer.
Now, you brought up a very interesting point that you avoid microwave ovens, and this is something that has got me kind of wondering, because just about every American, everybody has a microwave oven, and we're all so used to quickly just popping something in there, heating it up and throwing it on the table. What is the basis for people to avoid use of a microwave oven if, in fact, you decide to go with the naturalistic way of healing yourself? What's the basis for that, if I may ask?
Well, when you use a microwave, think about it. It causes the molecules in the foods to bombard each other, and it sends a wave through the food. So it actually changes the molecular structure. And so that particular way that food is treated becomes a carcinogen for you. So I use an infrared oven, and the infrared oven heats food up really quickly. So that is a better alternative as opposed to using a microwave. A lot of people use plastic dishes, and when you use plastic, the heat causes the plastic to leach into your food. If you're drinking water and you're using those soft plastic water bottles, well, if you leave the bottle in the car, for example, the sun heats the bottle up, and that plastic, it leaches into the food. So you're drinking plastic molecules, and you don't know how those bottles were transported to you in a truck or wherever they were they left outside in the sunlight at the warehouse.
Right.
And again, the softer the bottle, the more plastic leaches into your water. So if you look at the bottom of these bottles, you'll see a number, and the lower that number, the softer the plastic, and thus the more the plastic leaches into the food. So I got rid of all of my plastic Tupperware containers. I use glass containers to store my food in. I don't drink out of plastic bottles. So we're in a petrochemical society, and these petroleum products are killing us. In addition, to having things like the genetically modified organisms, you have the corn industry is just off the chain because they're putting Roundup in the corn. So that's what's collecting in our guts. This is why people are having these large stomachs now everywhere, because the Roundup is designed to explode in the stomachs of insects and kill them. So that's what's causing the gastrointestinal problems for us. And so all disease starts in the intestine. So we have to clean our intestines on a regular basis, meaning getting colon hydrotherapy and using substances like bentonite to pull the toxins out of our body.
Another interesting point there when you were talking about the fact of nutrients. Our bodies, we have a automatic built-in immune system. Okay, our white blood cells. And the question is with the medications and that people today are taking, I'm assuming, and this is only an assumption. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a practical nurse or whatever the hell they call them. But I'm assuming that because of these medications, that is also going to have some sort of effect on our natural body's immune system. Can you explain to us a little bit of how that affects the immune system that we are so dependent on?
Well, yes. Once again, all disease starts in your intestines. And so thus, if your immune system is compromised, if you don't have the nutrients in your body to sustain your immune system, and you have bacterias and harmful bacterias that are in your body combined with cholesterol in your veins, and you're destroying your blood vessels with all of these fatty, saturated fat things, then your immune system becomes compromised, and then that's when you can get diseases, because you're not cleaning the intestines. And so people have pounds of fecal material inside of their intestines, and this is hardening, and thus this is how you end up getting cancers, colon cancer and things like that. And so that's why it's so important to have a cleansing campaign, and to eat things like turmeric and cinnamon. These are natural seasonings that can actually enhance your immune system. So for me, food is medicine, and it's very critical that people understand that. If you look at various societies like India, where they have a lot of turmeric and they eat a lot of cinnamon and things like that, they have very low instances of cancer and other things. You look at the people in the middle in Asia, Japan, looking at their diets. But once McDonald's goes over there and they start eating American food, where their cancer levels start to rise dramatically, and that's what's happening right now.
Now, Jonathan, I know you're...
Yeah, I have a question. Yeah, I've got a question. First, two questions, really. I'd like a little more explanation, Walter, of what you mean, because I think our audience might benefit from this, about petrochemical basis for our medicine. I think you said something along those lines. I'd like that explained. And I would also, a simpler question is, do you ever recommend the eating of meat?
Well, yes, I recommend people eat meat, and everything that you eat needs to be done in moderation. The meat needs to be cooked correctly, and whenever you can, eat organic and eat free range, because what is happening is the beef is being fed the grains that have the genetically modified organisms and the pesticides. So then if you ingest that meat, if you ingest meat that has all types of bacteria and other things like that, well then you're still getting that same byproduct. And so when I'm talking about petrochemical, what I mean is that we have medicines being derived from petroleum and from other chemicals. And for example, the filler, what is the thing that keeps the aspirin together? When you take an aspirin, there are fillers in it. So they use talcum powder, or in some cases when you have fish oil, that casing is actually lacquer. So that's a petrochemical derivative. They make that casing that they put the fish oil inside of out of something that's made from petroleum. So this kills you. So the things that your medicine.
So when you're saying that, let me see if this makes sense. You're saying, for example, whenever we take a vitamin, and you look at a vitamin typically in a store and you go, oh, that's a good thing. But what you're saying, I think, is that when we see something that says gel cap, we're compromising ourselves.
In some cases, yes, because again, there's binders that hold those particular vitamins or what have you together. So the binders are very important to know what they are. I mean, so there are sublingual medications you can take that you put under the tongue, for example. There are things that can be absorbed into your cheeks. So I have looked at the delivery mechanisms which we use to take these medications. So you got to be very careful in terms of selecting your vitamins, because you still can be ingesting petrochemical or things made from petroleum into the body. So the petroleum industry has been very crafty in terms of getting their hands into everything. If you look at the plastic dishes, once again, that's made from oil. Your Tupperware and stuff, that plastic, it comes from oil. And so now you put hot food into that and it leaches into it. So we're being poisoned from many different levels. When you buy canned goods, for example, in some cases the preservatives, they spray the can with preservatives, and thus that doesn't have to be listed in the ingredients. So if you're eating pineapple, for example, that comes in a can, they can put a preservative inside of the can. The can manufacturer does that, and then the Dole Pineapple Company or whatever puts the pineapple inside of that can. Well, that preservative may not be listed on the ingredients for the pineapple. So we're being poisoned from many different levels. And the thing to keep in mind is that when you buy things in a jar and you buy things in a can, well, you're basically getting acid, a lot of acid. So acid is how cancer thrives. And this is why we have this dramatic rise in cancer in our society. And I want to make sure I mention one other thing that's really terrible that people don't understand, and that's the high fructose corn syrup. So once again, with the corn industry, they have developed a sweetener which is 1/3 the cost of sugar. Yet this sweetener turns off your body's ability to know that you've had enough to eat. And so this is why we have the explosion of obesity. Coca-Cola, Pepsi, when you go to McDonald's, you get those soft drinks, they all have high fructose corn syrup in it. When you go to Subway, some of the sauces they have high fructose corn syrup. Look at the bottles of your ketchup. It has high fructose corn syrup. Even your turkey meatballs and breads and rolls, they have high fructose corn syrup. And so this is a deadly ingredient. And so these companies are more concerned about how things taste, not that they are good for you.
You know, I hate to interject here, guys, but I got one I have one question for you. You know, Walter, and I mean this rhetorically, so please don't take it literally. Is the people at Monsanto must really be loving you, because you're talking about the GMOs that they use. to get their grains out and all of this, and then they feed it, like you said, to our cattle, to the chickens, and all this, and these chemicals are, of course, absorbed by them. Now, the question that anyone would have is, okay, we know this is going on. How can we protect ourselves? How can we find or make for certain that the foods we eat, the meats we eat, does not have these chemicals in it? Is there like a specific brand that people would be looking for, or a particular ingredient to avoid, or what?
And let me just ask and say to Walter, too, piggybacking on what Jan said. See, Jan has asked a brilliant question, because I think our audience, and I feel very strongly that what you're saying can make a great deal of sense, Walter, but it all feels in some respects so overwhelming. So is there a kind of guide that's what I think Jan is asking for? Is there some guide that our audiences can take and say how to make this doable in our regular daily lives?
Yes, well, I have a blog. It's called Holistic Central, and I keep track of a number of sources. So it's holisticcentral.blogspot.com, and there's also Ty Bollinger's website, cancertruth.com, and there are a number of different websites, and I've got them listed on my blog. But what I'm saying to you is this. I know that it may seem overwhelming, but what we have to do is to start holding our government accountable and start making the FDA do its job. Right now, for example, the cost of generic medications are going to go up 3,000% for most people. So some of the stuff you're paying $100 for is suddenly going to start costing $3,000 real fast here. Because what is happening here, we have a revolving door between the FDA and the pharmaceutical industry. So what is happening is someone becomes a high-ranking officer in one of the petrochemical, one of the big pharma companies. Then they go into the FDA. They become a director in the FDA, and then what they do is they go after their competition, and they do inspections, and they catch them off guard, and then they find violations, and they put them out of business. So as a result, the number of companies making generic drugs has dropped dramatically. And so as a result of that, the price of generic drugs is going through the roof. And right now, the pharmacies like Walgreens and Rite Aid, they are absorbing those costs. But those things are going to catch up. They're going to raise the rate of insurance that we're paying. So what I'm saying is we have to start making our government, making the FDA do its job, and that's to be making our food supply and our drug supply safe for the American people. No. But until then, there's no way to avoid this stuff. You're going to have to practice cleansing. In other words, you're going. I mean, I go through my life every day knowing that I'm getting these things, and this is why I get involved with cleansing campaigns like using bentonite and colon hydrotherapy.
Now you brought up something very interesting there when you said we need to hold our government accountable for our food supply. Everyone knows that the FDA is not only understaffed, they're underfunded. We've heard about salmonella outbreaks across the country. How do we hold our government accountable when our government can't even protect us with the budgets they have?
Well, that's one of the strategies involving lobbying. So one of the things that happens when certain people in our government don't want to see regulation work, they underfund the various departments and then say, well, see, this doesn't work because they cut the funding. So we've got to be watchdogs. We need citizens oversight committees that don't allow them to do this. We need to hold these Congress people accountable for cutting these budgets and destroying the safety that we have in terms of our food supply. So we have the money. The money's out there. The banks are making the money up out of thin air. Anyway, the money's there. There's no such thing as a money shortage. They can print as much money as they want. So this is all fabricated in terms of saying we don't have enough money. There's not funding. Well, that's just a lie. We always have funding for wars. They never run out of money to go over and destroy somebody else's country. Or the F-35 fighter, the money spent on that could build 60 solar-powered desalination plants. We wouldn't have a water shortage here in California if we had, the right things. So, but the thing is that people feel powerless and people feel apathetic.
I'd like to support something, if I may. I'd like to support something very specific that Walter just said about how things are going up in price for a variety of reasons, mainly because I'm a kidney transplantee. I'm on Medicare, despite the fact that I'm only 63 years old. And yet, at the beginning of this year, I got from Kaiser Permanente just a notice saying that my monthly premium was going up from $15 a month to $25 a month. Now, okay, you could say, all right, $300 a year, not so terrible. But look at that percentage increase. That really does support what Walter just said. It just occurred to me.
It does. And the thing is what I guess what our listeners are probably wondering right now, and Jonathan brought it up. We are overwhelming them with information that they need to know. And Walter, you brought up a couple of very good websites to go to. Your blog, I forget the other website you had mentioned, but where else can people go to find this information? I mean, is there other websites that you know of that people can go to and say, okay, I can go here. This will tell me, what organically grown foods there are, where there are these nutrients nutrients you are talking about that do not have any of the petroleum-based products in them.
Yes, well, there are a plethora of websites, and I'm actually bringing them up now on my computer so that I can give you some accurate information. But cancertruth.com, that's one of the most comprehensive websites that you can, know about right now, in terms of really having a listing of those other websites. And so I go to Sprouts, for example, and Whole Foods to purchase a lot of my foodstuffs, to get my organic foodstuffs. And so when you look at those kinds of websites that are oriented towards organic foods, just look at websites that give you information about organic food and naturopath doctors. If you look up naturopaths, if you go on Google Plus, you can find a whole hundreds of naturopath doctors all over the world. And then they look at their websites, and then they'll have information that leads you to the answers that you're seeking in terms of how you can manage the miasma that we're in. I understand how overwhelming this is. But for me, I've been researching this for years because I had a choice to get the traditional treatments and have the side effects, or to save my life by doing research. So we all are going to have to do a lot of hard work, and I'm still learning, by the way. We all have to do a lot of hard work when it comes to getting to the bottom of how we're going to protect ourselves, because the government agencies, the FDA, is not going to protect us. In fact, they're in bed with the very people that are killing us through our food supply. So we have to stop lobbying. Lobbying is the thing that's making us unsafe on so many different levels, because rich people don't need regulation. People talk all this stuff about smaller government and don't have regulation, but rich people don't need regulation. They don't want regulation. But the rest of us, we are the ones that need protection from these powerful entities that put profit above our safety.
Jonathan, I can hear you.
I just want to say that I think his point about the working classes and the middle classes needing government to be responsible is quite right, because we all know that if you are among the 1%, you can go anywhere. That's why, I'll make this analogy, and we don't have to stick with this, of course, but it's why anti-abortion laws are really wars on the middle class and poor, because we all know that whether it's for nutrition or whether it's for women's health, the rich can go anywhere, anytime they want.
Well, the other thing too that I have to interject here is that many programs that people have brought out, and right away, the FDA says, well, this is not FDA approved. This is under clinical trials, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We hear excuse after excuse after excuse from the FDA, including underfunding, understaffed, all of this. And for the average American to become proactive in this, is there I want to say centralized base people can go to become part and become proactive in getting the FDA to say, hey, maybe we need to really rethink our ongoing processes?
Well, one of the most central sites I can recommend, which I just brought up, go to cancertruth.net, and that's Ty Bollinger's site. But in terms of really organizing as people, I don't think anything like that exists right now. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to lead a public information campaign in order to inform people of the necessity for us to hold the FDA accountable, and so there's a multi-pronged approach towards this, in which we're going to have to stem lobbying, because this is happening across the board in terms of safety. When we had all this deregulation come about, the regulation of the banks, this is why we lost our homes, because the Glass-Steagall Act was repealed by President Clinton, and so this started with the Reagan Revolution, when he decided to deregulate. That's trickled down into our pharmaceutical industry. But this again started in 1910 with the Flexner Report. So everybody needs to look at that. You go to Wikipedia, look at the Flexner Report, and see how the petroleum industry has been able to take over our drug supply. And they are running the FDA. The FDA is being run by pharmaceutical companies. And pharmaceutical companies are making a $400 billion profit every year. $400 billion.
Wow.
Walter, when you say Flexner, is that Flexner?
That's correct.
Okay, and who was Flexner?
This was a group of scientists, per se, that were commissioned to certify medical training and medical procedures. So essentially what they did was they said that these procedures are going to be considered quackery, and then these are going to be the accepted standards. So the American Medical Association.
That's what I was just about ready to ask. They were the precursor to the AMA.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
that says it very well. Thank you both.
Yeah. So the American Medical Association, which is criminal in terms of what they're doing. They're forcing people, for example, to take chemotherapy. This young girl in Connecticut was just forced to take chemotherapy against her wishes and against the wishes of her mom, and the course of her chemotherapy is going to be done 3 months before she turns 18. So at that point, she's going to be sterile.
Well, my question is I thought, I was always under maybe I've been totally lied to all my life, is that what we do with our bodies as far as seeking medical help is our decision, not some politician, not some judge, but I always thought it was our decisions of how we wanted to be treated. But from what you just said is this poor 18-year-old girl... 17, excuse me. Thank you for correcting me. This poor 17-year-old girl, her and her parents do not have a voice in what is going to be for her. They are not being allowed to look for a potential alternative medical procedures. they are being told by the courts, and in some ways, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, the AMA, who is in bed with the petroleum companies, are saying, look, we want that money. I don't give a crap what these parents want.
Exactly. Well, the thing is that CPS is involved with this, social services is involved with this, so they can take your child away, such as what was done with this young child in Connecticut. They took her from her parent, and she's locked in a hospital right now, and they're forcing her to take chemotherapy. You can be forced. Children can be forced to take chemotherapy. They'll take your child away from you. With Marianne Gatto-Boldo, for example, I did a story on her with Allison Fulmar in Michigan.
I heard that story on your show. It was very compelling, Walter.
Yeah, I mean, so that was all over the news, and so they took her child away and gave her child Risperdal. Now, my grandson was forced to take Risperdal. Risperdal has caused him to grow breasts, and they have milk in them, and he's 18 years old. Now imagine being a young man with breasts with milk inside of him. The type, he's tried to commit suicide 3 times. Now, your child, in Michigan, you can't do that anymore. You parents can't be forced to give their kids psychotropics. But you can still be forced in other states to give your child Risperdal, even though they know it has these terrible side effects.
So what we're getting at here is, we have, it sounds to me we have a extremely broken system here where parents no longer can, in some instances, seek the proper medical care they want. They're being dictated to by a broken system. I mean, how wrong is that?
Well, it's terribly wrong. I mean, I could not imagine someone making me take chemotherapy. My wife was paying $8,000 per treatment. Her medical bill was $32,000 a month, and it was for 10 years. If you look at the American Cancer Society website, they have this thing called chemo brain on there. And so my wife got to the point where she thought I was trying to kill her. I had to actually separate from her and get a protective order before she died, because her brain went away. Now, I also own an insurance brokerage, and about 5 years in to treatment, I noticed that my clients basically lost their minds. They all changed, and I kept seeing this change in my clientele, where their marriages were breaking up, they were dropping their insurance plans, all kinds of things were happening. And so the average person only lives 3 to 5 years after they get the chemo. Some people last 10 years. So on my blog, I have stories of people that were told they were going to be dead 21 years ago, and they refused to take the chemotherapy, and they're still alive. I refuse to take the chemotherapy. I'm still alive. My family members, my friends, they're dead now. So it is not a good track record. Now,
I have a quick question for you, Walter, having to do with that case of the 17-year-old girl in Connecticut. When she turns 18, does her legal status change? Does she have the right to walk out of that hospital?
Yes, she does. But unfortunately, her treatment will be completed 3 months before she turns 18.
Oh, brother.
So here, like I said, it seems we have an extremely broken system, a system that, even if it is DHS, Department of Human Services, or whatever you want to call it, social services, protective services, whatever you want to call it, it seems that they are caving in to, these, what can I say? They're caving in to the mega corporations who are influencing what not only goes into our food supply, but what medications and that we take. It seems to me this, something is way out of kilter here.
Well, yes, you're right. Now, you need to understand that these social workers don't even have degrees. Okay, they don't have any type of qualification yet. A social worker can make you give your child a psychotropic if they make the recommendation. So the social services thing is out of control right now. And the reason is that some of these social workers are given a bonus when they take your child away from you. The other part of it is, in 1970 or so, they decided that, okay, if a social worker makes contact with you and then something happens to your kid, that social worker is responsible if they didn't take action. So they're going to err on taking your child away from you as opposed to letting the family remain intact. This is a huge business, and through Social Security, these private agencies are getting a huge payoff. And I went undercover. I went through foster care training back in June out here in California. And I said to my trainer, a social worker, don't you guys know that these psychotropic drugs are very damaging? They turn these kids into vegetables. And they go, yeah, we know, but it sure makes them much more calmer to deal with.
That's a hell of an attitude to have. I mean,
So
we're
what you're
forcing
saying
this on kids.
What you're saying, Walter, is the psychotropic drugs really are for the benefit of the medical professional and not the patient.
Exactly. They don't benefit the patient. The DSM manual is a fraud. The psychiatric profession is a fraud. And so I've done many stories on this, with Dr. Stolzer out of the University of Nebraska. There's Abel Child in Connecticut. I did stories with them. Colonel Bart Bartman, a retired Army colonel. They all are saying the same things. Neurologists, they're all saying the same thing, that the psychiatric profession is a fraud. If you go to see a psychiatrist, you are going to be given medication. And they're not talking about just a temporary time. They're talking about the rest of your life. And they will take your child away from you, and they will give that child these psychotropic drugs that basically turn them into a vegetable. And then what is going to happen is they dump them onto the street when they're 18, when they come out of the foster care program. And then they get pregnant, they get involved with drugs, and then they end up taking their kids away from them. And so the revolving cycle, this is a huge money-making process here. And so the social workers are being very responsible. I have a plethora of stories where social workers have lied to take people's kids away.
No.
If you look at the Marianne Gatto Boldo story alone, they sent the SWAT team to her house, busted her door down, took her kid away, gave the kid Risperdal. Okay. So they're playing for keeps here. They're not kidding with you.
Now we've only got a few minutes left here, guys. So about 5 minutes, and I do want to ask Walter this. Excuse me. You have mentioned in your program about an ongoing tear effect. Okay, what I mean by that is, let's say, for example, you've got a kid that was diagnosed with ADHD. They give them medication A, but because of the side effects of medication A, they need medication B, and because of the some of the effects of medication B, we're given medication C, and you know what I mean. Okay, so these parents who are being forced to give these kids, aren't they being told, guess what? You may start out with medication A, but you're also going to have B, C, D, E, and F. I mean, what the hell's going on here?
Well, we're talking about a huge profit industry, and let me tell you that we're all being affected by this because our municipal sewer services, okay, they do not screen our water and take these chemicals out of our water. So if you're using, the water system, and you're cooking, let's say that you're making some greens or you're making beans, and you pour water into this pot from your water supply, guess what? You're getting those chemicals into your food. So right. I buy, reverse osmosis. Like you need reverse osmosis water systems in your house to filter all this stuff out.
You did bring up a very interesting, very, very interesting point there, and I want to stress this to people. When a lot of people, when they got a prescription that's expired or whatever, it was always a person's thinking, okay, we're going to throw it in the toilet, flush it down the toilet, the system will clean it out, but in reality it doesn't. So in essence, if we're drinking public water or even what they call distilled water, that's still going to have some of the chemicals, some of the prescription medications others are taking, and we're taking this in. So, we're all affected by this in one way or another, and I am so glad I got Walter on. I definitely want to get him back here in the very near future. So, where do we get the systems we need to take these chemicals out of our water?
Well, you have to get reverse osmosis systems, and the thing about that is that you're going to have to put lemon juice in the water in order to get some nutrients, because it takes everything out. But the issue is that when people urinate or whatever, they go and the water goes into the sewage, goes into our water supply. It ends up in the water supply. In other words, so we have to get those chemicals out of our water supply. This is why I always use reverse osmosis for cooking, for drinking, and everything that I do. And I want to just go back real quick and answer your question you asked me. I just found it on my blog. Abraham Flexner was the person that generated the Flexner report in 1910, and they were actually commissioned.
Thank you very much.
They were commissioned by the American Medical Association in 1904. They created the Council on Medical Education, whose objective was to restructure American medical education. So this is where they stopped people from being holistic doctors. Now, in some states, they have licenses right now. In California and places like Arizona, where I do interviews with Dr. Jessica Heyman. And by the way, go to Dr. Jessica Heyman's site. It's drheyman.com. She's got a lot of great information and resources. And of course, you can go to my blog, holisticcentral.blogspot.com, and you'll see the Flexner report, and you'll see the link to the cancertruth.net website. So I have a plethora of links on my blog that can take you to get additional information about what I'm talking about.
All right, guys, I hate to sum this up, but it is time for us to get out of here. Walter, once again, I want to thank you for taking, getting up so early. This is something we need to open the discussion about more. And if it's all right with you, Walter, and and Jonathan, I'd like to get you both back on in a couple of weeks and talk more about this and give the people information that they need.
That's great, because I know I have more questions that can't fit in this hour. So yeah, that'd be great.
But everybody else, what can I tell you? This is a subject that we do need to carry on this conversation. It's very fascinating. Once again, I want to thank Walter for being here today, and listen to his show every Saturday, 12 o'clock Central Time, right here on the Starcom Radio Network, Progress in the World by Walter Davis. So until then, that tells you it's time for me to get out of here. Stay tuned, because coming up right after NPR News, of course, the one, the only, Ed Till will be with you all the way till 4 o'clock. Until tomorrow, 6 a.m., this is Bob Williams. Take care of yourselves.